Masechet Megilah Daf Yod Aleph. We are continuing with our Petich Ta'ot. That was the opening that various rabbis gave when they were going to give their derasha regarding Megillat Esther. They wouldn't go right into the first pasuk, but start off with the pasuk from elsewhere and show how somehow that relates, and that would be a nice rhetorical introduction and also be a key to unlocking a key message of the Megillah. So we're starting off now, and we're going to finish all these petich ta'ot, and then we're going to go right into the first couple of pisukim and see some fascinating derashot explanations of those words. Rav Dimi bar Yitzchak patach la pitcha lahai parshata mehacha. So Rav Dimi gave the following opening peticha for his derasha. Ki avadim anachnu uba'avdutenu lo azavanu Elohenu vayat Alenu chesed lifnei malchei faras. Ezra says, although we are bondsmen, we are subservient, yet Hashem has not forgotten us in our subservience, but has given us mercy in the eyes of the king of Persia. So, ematai bizman Haman. During the time of Haman tried to kill them, but Hashem protected them and saved them while they were living under Persia from the evil doings of Haman. It seems like a very simple, straightforward statement. It's actually very deep because Megillat Esther doesn't say Hashem's name in it, and it's not evident that Hashem is the one that saved them. Right? They had to use their own strategies, but that's his very point. Hashem was there, and he's the one that saved us in the background. So that's a really important way to introduce the book. Rabbi Chanina bar Papa patach la pitcha lahai parshata mehacha. Hirkabta enosh leroshenu banu ba'esh u'ba'mayim. Pasuk from Tehillim says, you have caused men to ride over our heads. We went through fire and through water. But you brought us out in abundance. So talking about the hardships we went to, but Hashem saved us in the end. So what are the various hardships here? Ba'esh b'med Nebuchadnezzar harasha. During the time of Nebuchadnezzar, he's the one that took Daniel and his friends and threw them into a furnace, and they survived. So that's referring to our survival under the Babylonians. And water, that's during the time of Paro, when he was running after us. And number one, he threw all the babies all the baby boys into the Nile, and then threatened to throw us into the sea also. And he got what was coming to Midah. They were drowned in the sea. And you brought us out in abundance. That's during Haman, when we have abundant feasts and are happy. So we applied each phrase in that pasuk. Zachar chasto ve'emunato lebet Yisrael ra'u chol afsei aretz et yeshuat Elohenu. Another pasuk in Tehillim that Hashem remembered His mercy and His faithfulness toward Israel. All the ends of the earth have seen the salvation of God. Ematai ra'u chol afsei aretz et yeshuat Elohenu. When did that happen? That everybody in the world heard about the redemption. It must have been during this time of Purim, because that is when we know Achashverosh reigned, Mehodu Vad Kush, the whole settled world, and everybody in the empire was threatened, and they were all saved, and they all received the letters, and so therefore everyone knew how God redeemed them. Again, the theme of God being the one that redeemed them. Resh Lakish patach la pitcha leha parshata mehacha. Ari nohem bedov shokek moshel rasha al am dal. Like a roaring lion, like a ravenous bear, so is a wicked ruler over a poor people, from Mishleh. And so now we're going to atomize. Every single word, phrase refers to something else. Ari nohem ze Nebuchadnezzar harasha. Lion, that's Nebuchadnezzar. A lion that's come up from his thicket. That's Yirmiyah referring to Bavel. Yirmiyah was living during the time when Bavel, Nebuchadnezzar, was coming and threatening and destroying Jerusalem. Dov shokek ze Achashverosh, a hungry bear, that refers to Achashverosh. Tichtibe va'aru cheva achori tinyana damya le dov. Pasuk from Daniel, who sees various animals, he compares each animal that he sees to another one of the empires, and he says, and now I saw a second one that was a bear. And Daniel, this doesn't explain exactly what it's referring to, but Rav Yosef says that vision of Daniel, when he sees a bear, that's referring to the Persians, one of the empires that will rule over the world, including Israel. Shochlin v'shotin kedov. Now, why are the Persians like bears? Number one, they eat and drink like bears. I guess they have not great manners. Umesur balin basar kedov, and they're very fleshy like bears. Umegadilin se'ar kedov, and they're hairy like bears, these Persians. Ve'en lahem menucha kedov, and they never rest. They're always restless like bears, always coming and doing things. So this is the rabbi's way of making fun of Persians. I mean, they're referring explicitly to ancient Persians, but as you know, the Babylonian sages, Amoraim, are living under Persians as well, and so this might be some statement against their own culture, modern Persians. Moshel Rasha ze Haman, and so going on in the rest of the pasuk, who is the wicked ruler? That's Haman al Amdal, on a poor nation. Elu Yisrael shemedalim min hamisvot. When it says that they're poor, it's not that they're financially poor, but rather that they are poor in mitzvot. And so the reason why the punishment came upon them isn't only because Haman was evil, he was evil and anti-Semitic, but Hashem allowed this to be so because the Bnei Yisrael deserved and didn't do mitzvot. So now there's another important theological statement, right? Even the punishment that happens to Israel isn't just happenstance, but is also controlled by God. Rabbi Elazar petach la pitcha laha parshata mehacha. Ba'al saltayim yimacha mekarev b'shiflut yadayim yidlof habayit. We saw the pasuk once before in Kohelet. And when someone is lazy, then the rafters will sink in, the roof will sink in. And if someone's idle, then the house will start leaking. That's a parallelism. But Midrash is going to take this not literally, but metaphorically, because of the laziness that Israel had. And when they were learning Torah, didn't learn Torah sufficiently, thereby the enemy of Hashem became weak. What it means really is Hashem became weak. If you could say such a thing, it's quite an amazing thing. It's like our learning Torah is what energizes Hashem. It's what brings Hashem's message and energy and power into the world. And if we're not studying it, if no one's teaching it, then that message is not around. Then Hashem is as if to say weak. The word weak is equivalent to poor. And who is the roof? The roof refers to Hashem, because Hashem is the one that creates a roof out of water up in heaven when he separated the water below and water above. And therefore, going back to this pasuk, it means through laziness of learning Torah, Yimach Hamkareh, God, who is the roof, who is the protection, who lives up in heaven, who created the roof, will become weak, and because of that, the punishment will come. Okay, very interesting midrash there. Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak patach la pitcha leha parshat hamehacha shira ma'alot. Lulei Adonai shehaya lanu, Yomana Yisrael, Lulei Adonai shehaya lanu, bekum alenu Adam velo melech. Okay, so this famous pasuk, if not that Hashem was with us, says Israel, if not that Hashem was with us, when a man would arise against us. Now, usually, it's a king that rises against us. Various kings of various nations rise against us. What does it mean, bekum alenu Adam, that just a person? This refers to Haman. He was the main instigator. Achashverosh just kind of went along with it. He didn't even know who he was persecuting. And so, it's even worse to be persecuted by just a regular nobody, not even a king. That's Haman. From Mishle, when the righteous are in the increase, the people rejoice. When the wicked man rules, then the people mourn. What is this referring to? When Mordechai and Esther became the rulers at the end of the Megilah, everybody was happy. Everybody in the city was happy. Sounds like the Jews, even the non-Jews. They were good rulers. They cared about the people. And on the other hand, when Haman was ascendant and was the ruler, then the whole city of Shushan was depressed. He was a corrupt ruler, and explicitly was referring to the Jewish population because of what he did. But a bad ruler is bad for everyone. Okay, Rav Matana Amar Mehacha, ki mi goy gadol asher lo Elohim kerovim elav. So Rav Matana, he introduced his drasha with the pasuk. What nation is so great that Hashem is so near him to do great miracles? Rav Asher Amar Mehacha, O Nisa Elohim, is actually in the same chapter in Devarim. All right, has anyone ever seen a God save a nation out of another nation, like Hashem has done for us? That this is referring to where we were in Egypt, and yet Hashem went in there and redeemed us out of Egypt. The parallel to our story is, so too we were under the Persians. And so, it's one thing, I think in those days, people thought, in polytheistic times, people thought that each country has a God. So, okay, that God could be powerful in their own country, but wouldn't have power to go to another sovereign nation and save someone over there. That's much harder to do. But obviously, Hashem is the God of the whole world. And so that's why this is such a chidush, right? Have you ever seen such a thing? Only Hashem can do this. And that's a parallel between Yetziat Mitzrayim and the being saved in the middle of the Persian Empire. Hashem saves us there too. All right, so that concludes all of the Piticha formulas that the various sages introduced. And now we get to the first pasuk. Vayhi b'mei Achashverosh, Amar Rav, Vayhi hadad ichtiv, v'hitmakartem sham no'ibecha, lavadim ve'lishvachot. So Vayhi we could read it as we saw yesterday. Woe is this, right? Woe and mourning, like Nehi, when this happened. As the pasuk in Devarim says, and there you will sell yourselves to your enemies as bondsmen and bondswomen, and nobody's even going to want to buy you because of that. So this is referring to the Megilah Esther. First of all, Haman bought the right to destroy the people from Achashverosh, and then in the middle, right, Esther says, okay, if you sold us into slavery, that would be one thing. At least the government would benefit from that, right? And I wouldn't complain. But he just wants to destroy us, which is not even good for the government. It reminds you of Hitler during the Holocaust, where he went against his own war effort and killed Jews. It's one thing to enslave a people, another thing just to kill them wantonly. And so this is what this pasuk is referring to, that you won't even be sold on the slave market. Okay, and that's certainly a good reason to say vai and he to mourn. Ushmael amar lo me'astim v'lo ge'altim lechalotam lo me'astim b'mei Yevanim. And so in the pasuk in Vayikra it says, Hashem, after all the blessings and the curses, at the end of Vayikra, Hashem comes and says, nevertheless, even when they're in the lands of the enemies, I will not reject Bnei Israel. I will not abhor them to destroy them utterly. I will not break my covenant, Hashem says. So why the repetition? So the first one refers to Bimei Yevanim, during times of the Greeks, during the Hellenistic persecution before the Maccabees. Velo ge'altim bimei Nebuchadnezzar, I will not reject them, abhor them. That's during the time of Nebuchadnezzar under the Babylonians. Lechalotam bimei Haman, and lechalotam is during the time of Purim. It's a bit out of order, but okay. La'afer beriti itam bimei Parsiim, and I will not reject my covenant. That's talking about during the Persians. Well, Haman was also during the Persians, but maybe it's referring to some other things that happened during that time. Ki ani Adonai Elohehem bimei Gog uMagog, and then the pasuk says, I am their God. That's referring to in the future, when there's going to be future great wars, and nevertheless Hashem will be with us and will protect us. Okay, so that's how Shmuel understands that's how we introduced the Megillah. Okay, good. And here we are, B'matnit Hatana. Another Braita that is similar to what Shemuel just said, and the same pasuk. Lo me'astim bime kastim. So God did not reject them during kastim. That's the Babylonians. After all, I appointed these great righteous people to pray on behalf of the Jewish people, and so that is a sign that even when things are dark, there will be people there to save us. V'lo galtim b'mei yevanim. Galtim, this refers to the Greeks. Shamaditi lehem Shimon HaSadik. So this is expanding on Shemuel's version and it's actually explaining specifically what gives us hope and redemption. Well, Shimon HaSadik was one of the Kohanim Gedolim during the times of the Greeks before the Chashmonaim, and also Chashmonai Banav Matijah Kohen Gadol. Matijah, the Chashmonaim, they came and saved the day, saved us from the Greeks. So to try to destroy them, that our first Haman to try to destroy the Jewish people, and Hashem saved them through Mordechai and Esther. Again, that theological premise that Mordechai and Esther are only the messengers for Hashem's redemption. Okay, if you look in the standard Vilna printed edition, over here says Bime Parsiyim, but all manuscripts and even other early printed editions say Romiyim. In the note here, it notes that the Hebrew text reads Persians, but it says maybe in order to avoid censors, they took out Romans because they didn't want to offend Romans. But I don't think that's correct because all manuscripts and printed editions before, except for Vilna, have Persian. So I think that Persians in the Vilna is just simply an error, a printing error. But it in fact should be Romans. That was there in all the other textual variants. Okay, and so that refers to Shamati Talem Shalbet Rebi v'Chachmei Dorot. So to break my covenant, maybe the Romans during Hadrianic persecutions, they tried to force the Jews to give up their Judaism, and luckily we had the sages of the time to bring redemption. And even into the future, when there will be future persecutions, but ultimately no nation will be able to subjugate Israel, at least not permanently. Okay, to be Levi Amar Mehacha v'imlo torishu et yoshebei haaretz. I just said permanently. The rabbis, when they're writing this, they're living under the Romans, so they're already for a long time. So their hope is that the Romans will be the last of the empires of the world that will persecute the Jews. Okay. Mehachaim lo torishu et yoshebei haaretz. In Bemidbar it says, Moshe tells Bnei Israel, you better go and inherit the land and drive out the idolaters from the land, because if you don't, then they're going to be a thorn in your eyes and they are going to influence you for bad and make you and you'll become of the Avodah Zarah and you'll have the same fate. Okay, and so sure enough, Shaul HaMelech was supposed to do that, get rid of Amalek from the whole country. If he did that, then there would never be a Haman. All right, Haman is associated as a descendant of Amalek, and say, sure enough, Shaul didn't finish the job, and then Haman comes later on. This is the next pasuk after the one before, right? What I thought to do unto them, I will do to you. The Jewish people were subject to the punishment that Torah designated for its enemies because they didn't fulfill God's commandments. I mean, this is true for sure in Israel, that whoever's in Israel cannot be following idolatry or evil or murder or bad things. Anyone who does that gets kicked out of the land. No favoritism, whether they're Ammonites or whether they're Bnei Israel. So if you don't do a better job, then you will get kicked out also. And that is a justification for the threat of punishment in the Purim story. Achashverosh. Okay, now finally, Vahi Bimeh. Then we get to the third word of the Megillah. What does Achashverosh mean? Amarav Achiv Shel Rosh. Okay, obviously it's just the king's name, right? We have his name in records. That was his Persian name, and Greeks call him Xerxes, but Achashverosh is closer to the original Persian pronunciation. But Rav is making a play on words that he was the brother of the head. Uben Gilo Shel Rosh, and also the same nature. Ben Gilo literally means he was the same age, born on the same day. But because people born on the same day are under the same astrological sign, therefore they share common traits. Okay, who is this head guy that we're comparing to Achashverosh? Achiv shel Rosh, Achiv shel Nebuchadnezzar Rasha, shenikra Rosh. Nebuchadnezzar, the evil one, was called the head of evildoers, and so Achashverosh is his brother. Shene'emar antu resha di dahava. We know Achashverosh is called the brother, is called the head, because in Daniel, when Daniel sees the statue, and there's the statue has a head of gold, and Daniel says, "Oh, that refers to Nebuchadnezzar." Daniel says, "This is you," speaking to Nebuchadnezzar. He doesn't say to his face that you are evil. So we know that the head is Nebuchadnezzar. Achashverosh, you are his brother. Not literally, but meaning you're the same way. Ben Gilo Shel Rosh, hu harag, hu bikesh laharog, hu hechariv, hu bikesh lahachariv. Both of them were killers, and both of them tried to destroy the Bet HaMikdash. And kill the Jewish people. Shneimar, Malchut Achashverosh b'tchilat malchuto katvu sitna al Yoshevei Yehuda v'Yerushalayim. And we know this is true from Sefer Ezra, where it says, and during the time of Achashverosh, some evil doers, some troublemakers wrote accusations against the inhabitants of Yehuda and Yerushalayim. Okay, this is pasuk in Ezra. Actually, it could have quoted the whole anything in Megillat Esther to show this, but this pasuk in Ezra is actually very important because it's the only evidence outside the book of Megillat Esther that during the time of Achashverosh there was persecution. Maybe not the only evidence. There's also might be some others, but extra only evidence in Tanakh outside the book of Megillat Esther that shows that there was some persecution under the reign of Achashverosh, and this one was focused on Yehuda and Yerushalayim, whereas the Purim one was more expansive to everywhere. Okay, Shmuel Amar shehush haru penehem shel Yisrael biamav keshule kedera. So he says Achashverosh comes from shachor, that he wanted to as the face of the Jewish people was blackened in his day like the bottom of a pot. Bottom of a pot is all burnt. So Achashverosh wanted to blacken the Jewish people. V'Rabbi Yochanan Amar kol shezochro Amar ach lerosho. Rabbi Yochanan says, everyone who thinks of him says, woe to my head, right? Woe to all the troubles that Achashverosh did. Another play on his name. Rabbi Chanina Amar she'akol na'asu rashin b'yamav shnemar v'yasam hamelech Achashverosh mas. Others that everyone became rash, everyone became poor in his days because he laid extra taxes on the land. And because of that, everyone became poor. So therefore, that's another play on his name. Achashverosh, like Rash, you see Rashin there. Okay, who Achashverosh? And now we're going to the next two words. Maybe Achashverosh. Who Achashverosh? Well, this seems like it's quite repetitious. You just told me his name is Achashverosh. He is Achashverosh. Okay, and the simple meaning is he is the Achashverosh who Hamolech Mehodu Ve'ad Kush. Like you may have heard about him. So this is that very one, and not others. Actually, were several kings with the same name. So it wants to tell you maybe which one it is. Anyway, the Midrash is going to say who Berish'o Metchilato Ve'ad Sofo. When it says he is Achashverosh, he is the very same one from beginning to end. He was evil the whole time. Which is actually a good question about the character of Achashverosh. Was he evil? Was he just fickle? Does he not know what he's doing? Actually, a good reading is that he knew exactly what he was doing. He was very smart, and he was evil throughout. Okay, who Isav? Okay, similarly, we're going to see a whole bunch of people where it says his name and then repeats his name. And so here it says who Esav Avi Edom, and after giving his whole lineage. So why does it repeat his name? Similarly, Esav was evil from beginning to end. Hu Datan v'Aviran repeats their name. They were evil the whole time. So again, emphasizing his continuous evil. But we also have the name. We have repetition of names regarding good people. Avraham, who Avraham. This is in Divrei Yamim. Who besidko mitchilato vad sofo. That means that he was righteous from the beginning to end. The point is, it is still consistent. If you say who and repeat the person's name, it just means they are the very same one. Don't think that you might see a person in one guise or another, or one time when they're young and another when they're old. And you might say, oh, are they different people, different characters? No, it's the same one. So it shows that these people are consistently evil or consistently good. Hu Aharon Moshe, hen besidkatan mitchilatam ve'ad sofan. In Shemot, when it's introducing Moshe and Aharon, and it says, oh, these are the very, and it gives a lineage. It says, oh, this is the very two people that went to plead against Paro, and it repeats their names. So they were both righteous. V'David hu Katan. Here it doesn't repeat his name, but says David, he was the youngest of the family, of his brothers. Hu bekatnuto mitchilato ad sofo, kishim shebekatnuto iktin atzmo etzel mi shegado mimenu b'Torah, kach b'malchuto iktin atzmo etzel mi shegado mimenu b'chochma. He always acted with humility, just like when he was young and not in the unknown, he would always be subservient to those who were greater than him in Torah. Even after he became king, he nevertheless humbled himself before those who were greater than him in wisdom. And in fact, you see that when Natan Hanavi comes and rebukes him, he doesn't say, oh, who are you to talk to me? I'm the king. He says, okay, you're right. So he always maintains that humility. Hamolech, the next word in the pasuk in Megillat Esther, that King Ahasuerus was the one who reigned. Amarav shemalach me'atzmo. Rav says it means he reigned on his own, not inheriting the throne. And there was actually Ahasuerus did inherit the throne, but he wasn't the oldest brother. So this might be referring to kind of usurping the throne from the rightful heir, his older brother. So some people interpret Rav's statement for good or for bad. What does it mean he went and became king on his own? On his own means he's the only one that was fit to become king. And so that's why he went and became king. Others say he was not fit to be king. So how did he become king? By bribing everyone. He would give people money, and he came to the throne through corruption. Okay, Mehodu ve'ad Kush. He reigned from Hodu, from India to Ethiopia, which usually translated all the way from east to west. Rav Ushmuel Chadamar Hodu besof ha'olam v'chus besof ha'olam. So Rav and Shmuel disagree about this. One says that these countries are on two ends of the world, right, all the way east and all the way west, and that's the point. He ruled over this whole, the whole known civilized countries. Others say no, Hodu and Kush are near each other. Kush may be some place also in India, another section there. And the point here is not to minimize the expanse of his reign, but the point is to say, just like he was able to reign over places that were close by, that's easy, and if a king is in a certain has his capital in a certain place, it's easy to rule over those places that are nearby. But to rule over faraway countries, you really have to have a very good system of communication and trust and bureaucracy and people in charge. And that's the point. He was able to rule over faraway places as well as he did over close places. In fact, the Persians were known for their bureaucracy, even made fun of because of it. Okay, regarding King Shlomo, it says he had dominion over all the regions on the side of the river from Tifsach till Azah, Lavushmal chadama tifsach besof haolam v'azah besof haolam v'chadama tifsach v'azah v'adeh havu kaimeh. So same machloket when it says King Shlomo reigned over this whole place. One says it's referring to places that are very far apart from each other. And it shows King Shlomo ruled over a giant expanse. Others say they're actually near each other. And just like he was able to rule over places that were close by, so too he was able to rule over the whole world. This is a midrashic tradition that King Shlomo ruled over the whole world. I mean, in Peshat and Tanakh, he ruled over Israel, and but that's it. Okay, Sheva ve'asimu me'a medina, and now the Megillat Esther says that Achashverosh ruled over 127 nations. It says it in a funny way: 7 and 20 and 100. Why say it like that? Amar Rav Chisda b'tchila malach al sheba, b'sof malach al esrim, b'sof malach al me'ah. So actually, it was not 127. It's just showing the growth. First, he had 7. And then 20 countries, and then 100 countries. So actually ended off with 100, but I wanted to show you his rapid growth. Right, this guy opened 1 store, then 3 stores, and 100 stores. Wait a second, if that's how you can interpret it, then we have a similar formulation regarding many people, different people's years of how long they lived, and regarding Amram, it says that his years were 7 and 30 and 100. So what does that mean? He lived till 7 and then lived till 30, then lived till 100? I mean, anyone who lives till 100 is going to live till 7 and 30 between. So my darash be. So what would be the significance there? Okay, so you're right. And when it says regarding Amram that he was 7 and 30 and 100, that just means he was 137. There's nothing else to discuss. There's no deeper meaning. But here, since you already told me that he rules from Hodu Vad Kush, so I already know I could count myself. I'll take out a map and count how many countries that is. So why is the repetition to say 7 and 20 and 100? The repetition is to teach me this Tarasha that he rolled over 7, then 30, then 20, and then 100, shows his rapid growth. Okay, truth is, it would be interesting to read it the other way around, to use this Tarasha for people's years, that Amram, reached a certain level of commitment, of success, and of different stages of his life. And there are other midrashim that are like that, right? They were as righteous, like Sarah. She was as beautiful and as righteous when she was young as when she was old. Okay. Tenor Rabbanan Shelosha Malchu Bekippah. And so now that you mentioned the kingdom of Achashverosh and the kingdom of Shlomo, who ruled over great expanses, so now we're going to learn that actually there were 3 people in the history of the world that ruled over kippah, meaning the whole dome of the earth, the semi half dome covering the earth. Elohen Achav, Achashverosh, Nebuchadnezzar. Achav, the evil king of Israel. Dichtiv Chai Hashem Elokecha im yesh goy mamlacha shelo shalach Adoni Sham lebakeshcha. Okay, now in the Tanakh, Achav is only the king of the Northern Empire, an evil king, but he is successful in militarily and economically. So that is a true fact. And because of that, Eliyahu Hanavi was always against Achav. Because why should he have success? He's an evil king. And so Eliyahu caused the rain to stop, and Achav was then looking for Eliyahu. And so he sent Obadiah, can you go look for Eliyahu? And Eliyahu says, as Hashem lives, there is no nation or kingdom where my master has not sent to seek you. So Obadiah actually meets Eliyahu, finds Eliyahu, but he's a good guy, and he says, my master, the king, he looked everywhere for you. Now, if you say he looked everywhere, in every kingdom, in every country, well, how could Achav do that unless he was the king of the whole world? And so we prove from here that Achav must have ruled over the whole world. Okay, again, not the Peshat, but a fun derivation. And if it didn't rain over them, how could he have made them swear that you right. The rest of pasuk as he is not there, and he made the kingdom and the nation swear, made everybody swear that they didn't see Eliyahu. And they swore. How could he do that? How could they swear that he's nowhere in the country, in the world, unless he reigned over the whole world? Okay, Nebuchadnezzar dichtiv. So regarding Nebuchadnezzar, we know he ruled over the whole world because the Pasuk says, the nation and the kingdom that shall not serve this same Nebuchadnezzar and will not put their neck under the yoke of the king of Babel. That nation I will visit and with sword, and I will bring a pestilence until consumed by his hand. And so it's talking about any nation, right? That does not go under Babel. So v'hamamlacha, since it refers to any nation, must be that Nebuchadnezzar ruled over the whole world. Okay, in fact, he did rule over the whole Mediterranean world, and so that in terms of that region is true. Achashverosh, we already proved that he ruled over the whole world. Okay, Vituleka, now we wonder, really, is that it? Are those the only people in history that ruled over the whole world? We just mentioned Shlomo. La selik malchute. No, but he did not complete his kingship. This is based on another midrash that not found in Tanakh, that when Shlomo was king, he was kicked out of being king by some demon and became a regular citizen. That's when he wrote Kohelet, and so he didn't finish his kingship. Okay, well, that makes sense according to those who say he was first a king and then he was a regular person, a commoner. But another version of the story says he went back to being king, so he did complete his kingship. How come he's not mentioned as one who rules over the world? Shlomo had something else that was different. He ruled over not only the earth, but even over the heavens. He was able to control even heavenly spirits and demons and things. And so he was a different category altogether. All right. Hold on, Sancheriv, he was the king of Assyria, which was one of the great empires before the Babylonians. And he did rule over the whole Mediterranean. And it says in Yeshaya, who among all the gods of these countries that have delivered their country out of my hand, that Hashem should deliver Jerusalem out of my hand, right? So in other words, this is Sancheriv talking and saying, who of all the gods of all the country, of all the lands? So it shows that he was king of all the lands. Hold on, Assyria never conquered Jerusalem, although they besieged Jerusalem. Then various events happened and they were not able to capture it. So he didn't have the whole world. Okay, so he's not counted. Va'ika Daryavish, dichtiv Daryavish Malka ketav l'chol amemaya umayav lishanaya di dayirin bechol arash shelamchon yisge. Darius, a Persian king, and it says in Daniel that he wrote to the peoples, nations, and languages that dwell in all the earth. And he wrote them the following letter. So you see that he ruled over the whole earth. That's why he could send a letter to everyone. Ha ika sheva de lo malach alayhu dichtiv shefar kodam Daryavish ve'ekim al malchuta la'achash dar penaya me'a ve'asrin. No, he didn't rule over the whole earth because he only ruled over 120. This is a please Darius and Daniel to set over the kingdom 120 satraps, but we know there were 127. So you see that Daryavish was missing 7, and that's why he's not counted as someone who rules over the whole world. Like Koresh, about Cyrus. Cyrus says in the beginning of Ezra, Hashem gave me all the kingdoms of heaven. There you go. It's explicit. So why not count Koresh as someone who ruled over the whole world? No, there he's just exaggerating. He's boasting about himself that Hashem gave me everything in the world, right? And then the continuation is, and he commanded me to tell the Jews to go build a Bet HaMikdash in Yerushalayim. So he's just exaggerating. He has most of the countries in the world, but not all of them. All right, and that's the end of that. The words Chashverosh, Hu Achashverosh, Hamelech Mehodu Ve'ad Kush. Okay, so that's the first pasuk. Now we're ready for the second pasuk. In those days when the king was sitting comfortably on his throne. Well, that sounds, if you just forget comfortably, that sounds like when he sat on his throne. It sounds like the beginning of his reign. And the next pasuk says, in the third year of his reign, and then talks about the events that happened. So which one is it? Is it in the first year or the third year? The Rava explains, keshevet means keshevet means when he sat comfortably, when he was not worried anymore. The simple reading of this is, in fact, that and when someone starts to rule, they're still worried. Some enemy is going to come, someone else who wants to be the king, and they're still fighting off internal, external enemies until they have a system going and they know that they are comfortable with their reign. So that often takes 3 years, right? First year, second year, third, now chazakah. I'm good. I'm going to be the king. So, so it's easy to reconcile in the Peshat. But here's what the Midrash says: Amar Bel Shasar Chishevet Ana Chashibna Vela Ta'ina. So according to the famous Midrash, this has to do with what was he worried about before? He was worried about the 70-year prophecy of Yirmiyah. Yirmiyah said that the Jews are going to be exiled and under Bavel for 70 years, and then Hashem will bring them back. Now, Hashem brings them back. That means that they're going to come back, and they're now under the Persians. That's going to be bad for the Persians. That is going to be something negative happening to them. So that's why he was worried this whole time. But he made a calculation that the 70 years had finished, and yet, look, the Jews are not redeemed. So that's why he said, I'm ready to make a big party. Now, furthermore, he knew that there was a previous king that made this calculation, Belshazzar, the very last prince of the Babylonians. He made a calculation and he thought, now is the time, and he was making a party, but he made a mistake in the calculation. So, and then he was removed, right? The writing on the wall. Achashverosh says, I'm going to make a careful calculation. And he did. He thought he made a careful calculation, but this is not, whenever you're dealing with calendar issues and chronologies, is very, very difficult. He ended up making a mistake also. But he thought that the 70 years was over, and that's why he decided to make a party. Okay, now we're going to get into some chronology ourselves. And let's see, Maihi, what is the calculation that Belshazzar made? That was a wrong calculation. Tichtiv, ki lefi melot Babel 70 shana efkod etchem, muchtiv lemalot lechalbot Yushem 70 shana. First of all, Yirmiyah said, when the days of Babel will be completed, which is 70 years, Hashem says, I will remember you and bring you back to the land. That's in Yirmiyah. In Daniel chapter 9, he quotes that pasuk, and Daniel says, I sat down with all my books and I decided to try to calculate and figure out when will be the fulfillment of the ruins of Jerusalem, which is 70 years, right? So he's quoting Yirmiyah. Okay, so we know that many people were trying to calculate when this was. So let's calculate. We're assuming now that we're going to start off from the beginning of Nebuchadnezzar's reign, which makes sense because Bavel says you're going to be subservient to the king of Bavel for these years. So when does the king of Bavel, the main one, the one that that destroys the Beit HaMikdash, that's Nebuchadnezzar II, who rules from 605 till 562. The Gemara says this is 45 years. Even though it looks like a little bit less, it really depends on how you count partial years, when he comes to reign or when he dies. So those, depending on how you count those partial years, right? This could be 44, 45 years. Okay, so let's just take that 45 years of Nebuchadnezzar, and that would be from the beginning of the of being subservient to him. And in fact, right in the beginning of Nebuchadnezzar's reign is when he comes and takes over Yehoiakim and makes Yehoiakim into a vassal. Meaning Joachim serves Nebuchadnezzar. So it's a good time to start counting. Devil Merodach. And now the next king after him was Evil Merodach. It sounds like a great name for a villain, right? Evil Merodach. But it's actually just a Babylonian name. And he reigned, according to this, for 23 years. In fact, it's he only reigned for 2-3 years, but there was others in between. And the last of the Babylonian kings was Nabonidus, who was destroyed in 539 by King Cyrus. And so if you do count this for 62 to 39, it does come out to 23 years. The Gemara's chronology, the Gemara's numbers are correct, even though it's not mentioning all of the kings, it's only mentioning Evil Merodach. So just we'll count when we think of him, we think of all of the next 3 kings also till the end of the Babylonians. And that is 23 years. And 2 more years of Belshazzar, who was the son of Nabonidus, who tried to take over, not successfully, but he was around for a couple of years. You put all that together, that's 70 years. Once Belshazzar saw that the 70 years are finished, and the Jewish people still weren't redeemed, he took out all of the vessels of the Bet HaMikdash, which were in the Babylonian treasury, because Nebuchadnezzar put them there when he destroyed the Bet HaMikdash, and he says, let's all use them. And this is the famous scene in Daniel, that's in the famous Rembrandt painting of the hand coming out of nowhere and writing on the wall that Belshazzar's days are numbered. And sure enough, he was killed soon after. All right, so that's the story. Where are they getting this from? That he took out the kelim. Well, that's a different story. And then now we're going to see. Okay, that's the general way that we count this 45 and 23 and 2. And now the Gemara is going to go further into this and bring proofs for all of these years. Nebuchadnezzar reigned for 45 years. I mean, the easy answer is just look at my slides. But okay, they didn't have the slides. So the Amar Mor, they have to prove it. They have to go through the hard work. They can't just look it up in a history book. Galu b'sheva, galu b'shmoneh, galu b'shmoneh esreh, galu b'tshah esreh. So there was more than one exile of the Jews by the Babylonians. They were exiled in the 7th, 8th, 18th, and 19th year. All of these years are in fact mentioned in the end of Melachim and the end of Yirmiyah. The doubling, so it's the 7th and 8th year, that's actually is referring to the same galut. Just depends again how you count. If you count Nebuchadnezzar's first half a year, he started ruling in Elul. So from Elul to Nisan, do you count that as year 1 or as year 0? If you count it as year 0, then you'll end up with the 7th year. If you count that half year as year 1, you'll end up with the 8th year. But within that chapter of Yirmiyah, you see both ways of counting. And so that's why it says here 7th, 8th, 18th, and 19th. Same thing there with 18th and 19th, depending on how you count. Okay, so we know that there was all these galuyot. Galu b'sheva lechibush Yoyakim, galut Yehoyachin, shish shemoneh leNebuchadnezzar. The Gemara has a different way to reconcile than I just did of the half year. Instead, it says that the main galut Yehoyachin was in the 7th year after Yehoyakim was made into a vassal. Yehoyakim was the 3rd to last king. Yehoyachin was the 2nd to last king. I know that's confusing. And that is the 8th year of Nebuchadnezzar. So that's, in other words, Nebuchadnezzar took over Yehoyakim in the 2nd year, and then 7 years later, he exiled Yehoyachin. Galu b'shmoneh esreh b'chibush Yehoyakim, galut Tzidkiyah shehi Tisha Esrei Nebuchadnezzar. And then the destruction of Bet HaMikdash and exile along with that happened in the 18th year since Yehoyakim was made a vassal, and that is the 19th year of Nebuchadnezzar. The first year of Nebuchadnezzar's reign, he went and conquered Nineveh. Nineveh was the capital of Assyria, and it's true. First, the Babylonians destroyed the Assyrians. And then he went and he conquered Yehoyakim. וכתיב, ויהי ב37 שנה לגלות יהויכין, מלך יהודה, ב12 חודש, ב25 לחודש, נשא אוויל מרודח מלך בבל בשנת מלכותו, אז ראש יהויכין מלך יהודה ויוצא אותו מבית הכלא. Okay, this is the end, the last pasuk in Yirmiyah, and also the last pasuk in Sefer Melachim are parallel. And it says there, even though these books end on such a sad note, but it ends on one last happy pasuk, which is that in the 37th year since Galut Yehoiachin, and that was the first year of Evil Merodach. A lot of times when a new king comes around, he does good things. He frees people from jail to show his goodwill towards various groups of people. And Evil Merodach, in fact, freed Yehoiachin from prison. By the way, we have archaeological evidence for this. We actually have receipts of statements that Evil Merodach took care of Yoyachin and gave him oil and flour, and we actually have the instructions on a little piece of pottery. It says, go give Yehoiachin this much oil and this much flour, and it says his name on it. Okay, one amazing archaeological find. Okay, and for us, the point is that would happen 37 years later. Temane utlatin v'sheva. And so now we have. So now if you take 8 years that Nebuchadnezzar ruled before Gelut Yehoiachin, and 37 years during which Yehoiachin was in prison, and you get a total of 45. And how you know that Evil Merodach was 23 years? That's just a tradition. Okay, in fact, so that's the tradition they had. The tradition is true. It is 23 years, but not just for Evil Merodach, but he and the next 3 kings. And then V'tarteh Dideh and the 2 of Belshazzar, Hashiv'in, that's how you got 70, which was how we just calculated. Amar, Hashtava, Daitulami Parke, Apek, Mane, Debe Mikdesha, Ve'eshtamesh Behu. And it says, oh, see, they weren't redeemed. Now they won't be redeemed. And that's why Belshazzar made a party. Hainu de Kamale Daniel. And that's why Daniel said to him, Val Maresh Shemaya Yitzromamta, Ulemanaya di Bete, Haitiv Kodamach. And it says, you have lifted yourself against Hashem and brought the vessels of his house before you. And that very night that he did that, he was killed. And after that, Darius the Mede received the kingdom when he was 62 years old. Okay, this is based on the chronology in Daniel, that after Belshazzar comes Dariyavesh. This goes against the chronology in Ezra and in archaeological sources. Okay, but that's a bigger subject. Now, all that is background to Achashverosh. Amar ihu mit'ata'eh, ana chashibna v'la ta'ina. Achashverosh says, oh, Belshazzar, he made an error, but I'm going to recalculate, and I'm not going to make the same mistake. Miketiv the Malchut Bavel. In Yirmiyah, it doesn't say that that we should count from the kingdom of Bavel, but rather Le Bavel, because he's to Bavel. It doesn't say when. So my lebavel, galut bavel. So it doesn't mean from when Nebuchadnezzar begins his reign. That's not an important period to start, but rather when Bnei Israel first go into exile, the first Babylonian exile, and that's Galut Yehoiachin in 597 BCE. So kama basiran temaneh. So therefore, he's starting to count 8 years later than Belshazzar did. So that means he has to add 8 years to the end of his count. And so he did that, and he recalculated. He counted 1 year of Belshazzar, and 5 years of Darius and Cyrus, and the 2 first years of his own reign, Achashverosh's reign, and now you get 70 because it ended on the same place, and he added 8 more years. And so Achashverosh said, there you go, I'm at 70. And he said, since the Jewish people aren't redeemed, that means Yirmiyah's prophecy is not coming true, and they won't be redeemed. The whole time before that, he was afraid to use them, but now he brought out the vessels of the Bet HaMikdash. There is a hint to this in the Megilah, because when it's describing his party, it says Chur, Karpas, Techelet, Chable, Bus, Vargaman. These are all the materials or names of things that we also read in the building of the Mishkan. And we're also using the Bet HaMikdash. So that would be a hint to this. Ba Satan v'riked benehen v'haraget Vashti. So as a punishment, so Satan came and danced among them, a way of saying that he brought them confusion, and he then killed Vashti. Achashverosh killed his own queen by his own hands because of this terrible confusion, as a punishment for misusing the vessels of the Bet HaMikdash. Okay, good. So now the Gemara asks, hold on. Achashverosh seems like he did a good job in calculating. Really, wasn't that 70? And we say, no, he also made a mistake. Who said you should start counting from Galut Yehoyachin? Maybe you should start counting from the time when the Bet HaMikdash was destroyed. That's in fact the way Zechariah counts from destruction in 586 till the reconstruction in 516. And so if you start counting that way, then you see instead of counting from the 8th year, you'll start from the 19th year of Nebuchadnezzar. So sof kama basiran chadesar. Okay, so how many were lacking? 11. Ihu kama malach al besar. How many years did Achashverosh reign altogether? 14. So this story happened in the 3rd year of his reign. So right by the 3rd plus 11. So by the 14th year of his reign, the Bet HaMikdash should have been built at the end of Achashverosh's reign, but it wasn't. It was only built after that in the reign of his son, which according to Daniel's chronology was Darius. So then how come in Ezra says that the work of the house of Hashem ceased until the 2nd year of the reign of Darius? And so you see that it was not being built even at the end of the time of Achashverosh. Amar Rava, Shani mikutaot havu. Rava says, Achashverosh was still mistaken because of the partial years. The partial years always mess everyone up. When someone reigns only for a few months or even one day before the Rosh Hashanah, which was Nisan for the Babylonians. So do you count that as a full year or as a half a year? So Achashverosh was counting all his full years, and that's why he got to 70. But in fact, if you don't count those partial years at all, then you have to add another couple of years to the count. And that's how you get the correct count. Another Braita that says the same thing. There's yet another year left for Bavel because of the different calculation of half years. And then Dariavesh came, and he in fact built and completed the Bet HaMikdash. And so we end on a happy note of the rebuilding of the Bet HaMikdash. And if anybody ever wants to sit and go through all the chronology more carefully, it'll take a lot more time, but it's a fascinating exercise to go through. Baruch Adonai Le'olam, amen ve'amen.